an 8 original production.
Coming up on Arizona Collectibles.
Probably the most unusual piece I think we've seen.
Now I know a little bit more about what I can say about it.
And that your wife was right.
And my wife was right.
But what a wonderful thing to have.
I thought so.
Arizona Collectibles is made possible by Whitfield Nursery, proud to support 8 Arizona PBS, a Valley tradition since 1946. Over 200 acres of Arizona-grown trees, citrus, and palms. Complete custom design and installation. And Whitfield Nursery still does the digging. WhitfieldNursery.com.
I'm David Goldstein, owner of Biltmore Loan and Jewelry. We buy or loan on upscale assets. We have over 30 years of experience in determining values of automobiles, jewelry, art, collectibles, and antiques. For more information and appointments, BiltmoreLoan.com.
Morris Hall is a proud supporter of 8 Arizona PBS and the community it serves. Morris Hall has been servicing Arizona's estate planning needs since 1970 and can review or begin your estate plan. For more information, morristrust.com or 602-748-2231.
Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine strives to inspire physicians with a focus on preventative medicine and natural therapeutics. We are seeking people who recognize there's more to medicine than drugs and surgery. Applications at scnm.edu.
You know, we've had people bring us items that they simply picked up off the ground. Some came from thrift shops or even garage sales. And of course, there are all those things in your basement or attic. Hi, I'm Beth McDonald, and welcome to Arizona Collectibles, the show where we explore our past through its treasures and their history. Take a look at this week's finds.
Anthony, I'm pleased to see you've brought a document that's signed by John Hancock. Now, let me ask you, how did you acquire this? Did you acquire it recently or over a period of time?
I did acquire it recently, within the past year. I'm a huge collector in regards to founding fathers and signers of the Declaration of Independence.
What's nice about this document is it's a nice clear signature of John Hancock. Obviously, it's typical of those things that will say signed in the, I think this is the 6th year of our independency or of our government and so on. And this is 1781. And tell me a little bit about this document in terms of what's it deal with. It's a warrant.
Yeah, it is a warrant. While John Hancock was governor of the state of Massachusetts, more particularly, I'm interested in John Hancock primarily because obviously he was the first to sign the Declaration of Independence. He has this notoriety, and if you take a look at the Declaration of Independence today in Washington, D.C., you'll see that all of the words and names are all blurred out. So it's great to see actually John Hancock's signature so clear and bold on this document.
I love the boldness of his signature, and that remained somewhat typical throughout his career. Now, I think we can establish a value of it on today's market of probably in the $8,000 to $10,000 range, possibly a little more at an auction, a good auction. So I'd be comfortable with thinking that of it as a good value. Does that help you?
Very good value. Thank you so much for taking your time today.
Thank you, Anthony.
Hi, Cynthia. Thank you so much for coming in today. I am a folk art enthusiast, and when I saw these across the room, I was so intrigued. Can you tell me a little bit about them and what they are?
Well, these were a gift from Irma Bombeck, a well-noted humorist, to my Aunt Laura Danieli back in the 70s, and both of them were very good friends. And my aunt asked me if I'd like to have them, and I was a Watergate junkie, and I grabbed them up.
Fantastic. And Watergate does seem to be the theme on these two, what I'm going to call ores,
yes,
for lack of a better term, that are folk art inspired. And can you tell me a little bit about the pictures on the ores and what you think?
Well, the one on your right is Gerald Ford, then Vice President, who became our president. He's wearing a helmet. But what's interesting is he's got arrows pointing left and right because, as you remember, Gerald Ford was often teased about his clumsiness. So
on Saturday Night Live all the time.
Right.
It's fabulous. And how about the one of Nixon?
Well, Nixon is priceless. First of all, it's this kind of awful green. His eyes are very dark and deep, and as we know from President Nixon photos. But what's interesting is his hands here are holding money, dollars and hundreds of dollar bills, which the artist captured really well. And then at the top, he's got E pluribus unum, which was a real slap considering that he was going through the whole Watergate mess.
And you have so many characteristics of value that we look at within the collectible and folk art field. It's really fascinating. One is the caricature aspect of the politicians themselves. Secondly, we've got the political intrigue around Watergate. And then third, it's the folk art on the ores and by the artist. So in evaluation process, we look at all of these different characteristics to try to ascertain what the value is. Now, these ores were painted by a gentleman named Orson Remo, and I did some investigation, and it didn't come up with any records of other works that he had done. But what I did in the investigation of the values is I started to look at presidential caricatures, other folk art that looked at this kind of genre, as well as the medium that these are on. Now, have you ever had them appraised or looked at from a valuation standpoint?
No, I never have,
No. Well, it was a unique evaluation process. I think if these came on the market, and there is so much collectability around Americana, and especially political Americana, I would be very comfortable in saying that I think these would sell for at least $400 to $600 if they came up in an Americana auction. So I thank you very much for bringing it in. I love the history of both the politics as well as the Irma Bombeck connection with Arizona as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Nick, I want to thank you for coming in today with probably the most unusual piece I think we've seen today. Could you tell us a little bit about this piece?
Yes, around 2003, Air France conducted an auction of some parts taken from a supersonic Concorde jet after they retired all the jets in the world. And it was for charity. The Air France Foundation was going to use the proceeds for charities in North Africa.
Okay.
And I saw the items, there was over 200 items on the Champs-Élysées in Paris when I was there with my son during a school field trip. Okay. And about a week or two later, the auction took place, and I bid on 12 items over the phone, and I bought them.
What I thought we'd talk about today is, of course, this is about value. And it's also about the ethics of how you value something like this. And just looking at it, and I did ask you what you paid for it, but my hunch is that I figured, this would be right around $2,000 to $3,000. And then I found out that you paid how much for this?
About the same, $2,000 or $3,000.
Yeah,
as part of the collection.
Can you tell us this panel, what the actual piece was used for?
This is an intercom or an annunciation panel that the flight attendants would use to announce to the public in the seats or into the cockpit.
Okay.
And it actually flew probably 1.5 or 2 million miles in the aircraft itself, so it's a flown part with the public. Yeah.
And as far as value, there are no comparables. You'll see all the appraisers on this show talk about comparable values. And there is one. And that was when you purchased it in 2003. So we can only theorize that perhaps it might be valued at $4,000 to $5,000 coming up, and perhaps your entire collection. And could you tell us how much you paid for the entire group?
The entire collection was over $60,000, and then shipping was another several thousand to get it over here.
So you might have 70,000, 65, 70,000. I think it'd be safe to say that we could theorize that it might have about 20 to 30% more in value. But it would have to be offered in the same venue that you purchased it. It was purchased at Christie's.
Yes.
And there are labels, and I would suggest keeping these on. You have all the paperwork, I understand.
Yes.
Important to keep all of this for provenance. So Nick, I want to thank you for coming in and sharing this with us. I thought it was important for everyone to see.
Yes, thank you, Sean.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
have really got to go through my old jewelry again. Look what this person found.
We have something, you brought something that was, I understand, your father.
Yes, I was very surprised to open a box and find this bracelet in my father's collection. And he collected a lot of things, fine jewelry being one of them. My father was a nuclear physicist who had a lot of different interests, mainly art and jewelry and things of nature. So I think this piece really represents the majority of his interests.
It's really, really unique. It is a Mediterranean coral bracelet, mid-20th century, perhaps the early part of the mid-20th century, 40s or 50s. And this type of coral is no longer available. It's extinct. And you'll see this type of coral in antique pieces all the way up into the 20th century, but you can't get it anymore. It's not dyed, it's all original. It's one of the most valuable type of corals. The bracelet moves very nicely. It's exquisitely designed. And it's very rare. It's very rare coral. You can see each one of the panels. It flows very nicely, fits very nicely, has a nice gold and seed coral bracelet for safety. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece and very rare. Do you have any idea what it's worth?
No, I have no idea.
Well, it's hard to find comparables for something like this with this much coral in it. And coral in the last few years has gone up from being priced per gram to be priced per carat. Now there are 5 carats to a gram, but they made that transition for pricing. So old coral like this is quite valuable. My estimation of the value of the bracelet is somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000. It's really one of the nicest I've ever seen. Thank you so much for bringing it in.
Thank you.
Well, Peggy, I'm excited that you brought some very interesting things that are Arizona related. Now, tell me a little bit about how these came into your possession.
These were handed down from my grandparents to my mother to me. My grandparents were managers of the Tuba City, Arizona Trading Post, and there was a guest ranch affiliated with this. And many of the people that traveled in the late 1920s, early 1930s, came and went to the Grand Canyon, and they went to Canyon de Chelly, and then they stayed at this guest ranch with my grandparents. And so these are a lot of the folks that stayed there, and their signatures and their comments.
Yes. And some of these are Arizonans, and some of these are names I think most people would know. Gary Cooper has a marvelous little comment on it. He loved the place, and he said, I want to come back. Frank C. Lockwood. Now, Lockwood's one of my favorites. He was a great historian on Arizona history. He wrote on the Apaches, he wrote on the Pioneer Days in Tucson, but he stayed there, and while he was there, he read a Zane Grey novel, and he said this was a marvelous experience. And so much is about Arizona history and art. And there were 2 films made there in that area where there were people would stay there while they're making the films.
Yes, yes. One was called Sunset Pass, and one was called Kit Carson. And these were silent movies, and we have a lot of pictures, and my grandmother was an avid photographer. And so she would go out and take pictures, and then we have pictures that were made by the crew. And so we have quite a record of these folks that stayed there. And all of the cast and crew signed these guest books and left their little notations.
So now let me ask you this, have you ever had these appraised?
No, sir, I have not.
I think as a collection, these items in an auction would bring $1,500 to $2,000.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So you have done something of preserving and protected Arizona history, movie history, art history. It's a marvelous item. Thank you for coming in.
If you want to learn more about Arizona Collectibles and watch all our episodes, visit us online at azpbs.org/collectibles.
David, what is this item that you've brought in to us today?
Well, I think I call it a pot.
Okay.
I don't know if it's also a vase, but a cloisonne piece.
Okay, and do you know what cloisonne is?
Well, I've seen the process. I mean, I've looked into it, and yeah, I see how they put the enamel into the wires and heat it. I don't know how they could have done this.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
It blows my mind, you know.
And do you know if it's Chinese or Japanese?
Well, that's the argument that I have with Cheryl, my wife, and she says it's Japanese, and I thought it was Chinese.
Okay.
So now we need to discover that.
Okay. Well, this is, in fact, a really fine example of Japanese Meiji period, which extended from 1868 to 1912.
Okay.
And this piece would date probably from the end of the Meiji period, based to a great extent on its size, which is huge.
Yeah.
And the Japanese would have made this piece, it is Japanese, they would have made this piece for export to the West during the Victorian period when bigger was better. And you're exactly right that cloisonné is a process where powdered glass enamel is fired inside wire cloisons or cells. So this intricate pattern of flowers and geometric motifs, each one of these colors is inside a metal cloison. The colors are all applied inside, and then it's fired and polished, and the process is repeated several times until it becomes a perfect piece. It's on a metal substrate, and you mentioned to me that yesterday you spent a great deal of time polishing the metal on the top of this jardiniere, which is what we would call it. Yeah, or a planter, I guess we could call it a planter, but we would call it a jardiniere. And I just wanted to let you know that in the future, never polish it again.
I will.
Because the Chinese and the Japanese collectors like the old patinas.
Okay.
The piece is extraordinary. It has 8 cartouches featuring different flowers, as you can see. And there's surprisingly minimal damage to this piece. There's 1 or 2 little spider cracks and pock marks. Cloisonné cannot be repaired very easily, so it can detract from the value. So you want to be very careful when you carry this home that it arrives safely. Do you have any idea what the value is?
I have no idea. I know that we were talking several thousand, but that seemed like it was out of this world, you know, that kind of amount.
Well, I would say in a retail environment or at a well-publicized auction, I could see this piece selling in the range of $3,500 to $4,500, and that would be kind of retail and high auction value. So thank you for bringing it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and now I know a little bit more about what I can say about it.
And that your wife was right.
And my wife was right.
Well, John, welcome to Arizona Collectibles. What did you bring for us today?
Thank you very much, Jim. This is a Hawken muzzle loader. Came from my grandfather.
And where exactly did you find it? I think there might be a bit of a story there.
Well, as a kid, about 4 years old, I noticed it hanging in the rafters of my grandfather's garage.
Okay.
And I took it down, started playing with it, noticed there was a crack in it. And being the kid that I was, I grabbed a hammer and nail it and started to repair it.
So that was your first firearms restoration
project?
Yes,
my first project, and my uncle didn't like it at all.
Well, what you have here is what's commonly called a Kentucky rifle, although as most everybody knows, most of them weren't made in Kentucky. This particular example was made by a gunsmith named D.T. Hawken, who worked in Springfield, Ohio. He was noted for making percussion long-barreled rifles. That's what this one is. Overall, it's pretty complete, which is good considering the age. The rifle probably dates from about 1840, 1850 time frame. It's a small caliber. It looks to be about a 36, so this is what they commonly called a squirrel rifle back then. In general, it was used for small game hunting. The rifle is unrestored, which is nice. It doesn't look like it's ever been messed with other than the little occurrence you mentioned earlier. I did notice a couple of things about it that really, as far as I'm concerned, need some attention. The nipple is missing where the percussion cap would go. That's an easy fix to get another nipple. I would also get the lock worked on, get it tightened up and in an operable condition. It certainly would help the value of the rifle. It's equipped, as most of these rifles were, with a set trigger. You pulled back on that trigger until it clicked on the rear one. Then the front trigger was basically a hair trigger, and it took very little pressure to set that off. And it also has a screw here so it could be adjusted. The rifle is signed on the barrel, D.T. Hawken, and again, he was noted for making fairly plain Jane rifles of this type. Have you ever had the rifle looked at or had it appraised by anybody?
No.
In this condition, I would put it in the $600 to $800 range as a marketable price. If I were, again, to get insurance on it, I would put an appraised value on of around $1,000. So it's a very nice piece.
Thanks.
What an interesting thing you've brought to us today. Can you tell me a little bit about what we have here?
It's a baseball. It is
a baseball. You're right.
A Rawlings baseball with some signatures on it. A couple that I recognized, a couple I didn't.
Okay, and tell me, where did you get this ball?
Thrift store.
You know, thrift stores can be awfully good bargains.
It was a good thrift store for a charitable cause.
Okay.
You've heard of them, the Boys and Girls Club?
Sure, absolutely. Can you tell me what you paid for it?
$200.
Okay, well, you know, it's an interesting ball.
Oh, I can feel it.
No, don't. You know, immediately we have Reggie Jackson, but we also, if we take a turn of the ball, we've got Ted Williams. We've got Mickey Mantle. I'm going to take another turn of the ball. I've got Hank Aaron, and I've got Ernie Banks. There are other signatures on here that I have not been able to identify, but what we have here is a collector ball. I mean, it's a ball that was presented to these people probably at an event that they were all gathered at. It would have been an unusual event for them all to be able to sign this ball. Now, Ted Williams baseballs, while Ted was playing and are identified as such, can be several $1,000s for just his signature. I think a collector ball like this, because it was somewhat a contrived event to put them all in the same room to sign the ball, is not going to have as great a value. But you've got some great signatures. Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, Reggie Jackson. I mean, these are highlights of decades of baseball represented in one ball. I think if it came up at auction, in a good sports memorabilia sale, we would be looking somewhere in the $2,800 to $3,500 range. The signatures are good, they're strong. What I think one of the things that would really help it would be to send it to one of the authenticators of signatures, particularly for baseballs. We don't have that kind of documentation with it now, and I think acquiring that kind of documentation, the signatures look very good. They look consistent with other signatures on authenticated balls that I've seen. So I think that would be a step worth the money to authenticate certainly those 5 signatures and maybe identify the ones that are less identifiable right now. But what a wonderful thing to have.
I thought so.
I mean, and a wonderful cause, Boys and Girls Club. You know, and certainly worth the $200, and I think quite a bit more than the $200 you originally paid for it.
Yay.
So thank you for bringing this out.
Thank you for being here.
We love it.
We love it too.
Have you seen enough treasure for now? Me neither. So let's take a look at what's coming next time.
I would not be surprised.
Ken, let me shake your hand and congratulate you for such a nice piece.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I know it was my father's, one of his treasures.
I've really treasured our time together, but now it's time to say goodbye. I'm Beth McDonald. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Arizona Collectibles.
Arizona Collectibles was made possible by
Southwest Naturopathic Medical Center concentrates on whole patient wellness, body, mind, and spirit. Our focus is on preventative medicine and natural therapeutics, inspiring overall well-being. More information available at medcenter.scnm.edu.
I'm David Goldstein, owner of Biltmore Loan and Jewelry. We buy or loan on upscale assets. We have over 30 years of experience in determining values of automobiles, jewelry, art, collectibles, and antiques. For more information and appointments, biltmoreloan.com.
Morris Hall is a proud supporter of 8 Arizona PBS and the community it serves. Morris Hall has been servicing Arizona's estate planning needs since 1970 and can review or begin your estate plan. For more information, morristrust.com or 602-748-2231. Whitfill Nursery, proud to support 8 Arizona PBS, a Valley tradition since 1946. Over 200 acres of Arizona-grown trees, citrus, and palms. Complete custom design and installation. And Whitfill Nursery still does the digging. WhitfillNursery.com.